Good morning. Hi there. Welcome to Story Hour. This is a special edition of Story Hour because in our studio today we have the 4 and 5-year-olds from Community Daycare Center and Preschool. Today our stories are all about summer. The first one is called The Perfect Picnic. It was the first day of summer. Goose jumped out of bed and ran to the window. The sun was shining brightly. "What a perfect day for hen's picnic," she said. She took out her sundress, her sandals, and her sunglasses. As she got dressed, she hummed a little song. "This outfit is just right for a hot summer day," said Goose as she skipped down her front walk. Just then, a big cloud covered the sun. A cool breeze began to blow. Goose shivered. "I'm too chilly in this sundress now." She went back inside and put on long pants and a jacket. Goose hurried to the pond. She got into her boat and began to row to Hen's house. Suddenly, something wet landed on her head. Goose looked up. "Oh no!" she cried. Dark storm clouds were moving across the sky. Plip, plop, plip, plop. More drops landed on Goose. It began to pour. Goose rowed back to her island as fast as she could. She rushed into her house and took off her wet clothes. Then she called Hen. "How can we have our picnic in the rain?" Goose asked Hen. "Oh, it's just a passing shower," said Hen. "It will clear up. Hurry, Duck and I are waiting for you." Goose put on her raincoat and boots and got out her umbrella. Then she headed outside for the third time. When Goose got to the pond, she saw that her boat was filled with water. So she began to bail out the boat. "It will take hours to get out all this water," she complained. "Now I'll really be late." At last the boat was empty. Goose got in and began to row. When she got a little way out, she noticed that the rain had stopped. The dark clouds were moving away. Goose took off her raincoat and boots. She rowed on. Now the sky had turned a lovely shade of blue. The sun was shining. "I'm roasting in these pants," said Goose. "I'd better go home and change my clothes." So Goose rowed back across the pond. She hopped out of the boat and headed up the path to her house. But when she tried to open the door, it was locked. "Oh dear, where's my key?" she cried. It wasn't in her bag, and it wasn't in her pocket. "I'll have to climb in through the window." Luckily, the window wasn't locked. Goose opened it and squeezed through. She landed on the floor with a thud. Then she quickly brushed herself off and headed into the bedroom. As she put on her sundress, a button popped off. "Oh no," Goose said, "I'll never get to the picnic at this rate." She quickly sewed on the button and finished dressing. When Goose opened the door, she couldn't believe her eyes. The sun wasn't shining. Everything was dark and wet. It was raining again. "That does it," she shouted. "I'm not going anywhere today. I've had enough of this. I've had nothing but bad luck." Goose called Hen again, but before she could say anything, Hen began to speak. "We can't have a picnic today, that's for sure. It's pouring here. Maybe tomorrow. Goodbye." Goose said goodbye and hung up. "What a terrible day," Goose said miserably. "Everything has gone wrong, and now I have nothing to do." Goose sat in her chair and stared out at the rain. Soon she began to doze. The sound of the doorbell woke her up. When Goose opened the door, she saw Hen and Duck. They had a large picnic basket. "We didn't want to waste all this delicious food," said Hen, "so we decided to bring it here." "We can have a picnic indoors," said Duck. "That's a great idea," said Goose. "Come on in." The three friends began to prepare for the picnic. They spread a blanket on the floor. Then they put out all the food. It was a feast. "Something is missing," said Hen. "There's no sunshine." "I have just the thing," said Goose. She brought over a large lamp and turned it on. Bright, warm light shone down. "That's better," said Hen. "Now all we need is a breeze." Goose turned on a little fan. A light breeze began to blow. "This is just like a real picnic," said Hen. "The only thing missing is the ants," said Duck. "We can do very well without those," said Goose. Everyone laughed and munched on their sandwiches. "When I got up this morning, I said it was a perfect day for a picnic," said Goose. "It certainly hasn't been a perfect day, but this is a perfect picnic." The perfect picnic. Our next story is Samantha Seagull's Sandals. A long time ago, there lived a young silver gull who wanted to be different. Her name was Samantha. "Why am I the same as all the other young gulls?" she asked Hector the hermit crab, who was old and wise. "The same gray bill, the same gray legs, the same gray feet. I want to be different. I want to be different right now." "Ho, ho," said Hector in a voice as deep as the ocean. "You will be different one day. Wait and see." But Samantha could not wait. She thought and thought until she had a bright idea. "I know what I'll do," she said to herself. "I'll buy some shoes. Then I will be different." So Samantha went to a shoe store and bought a pair of high-heeled shoes. "How smart and how different I am," she said as she stepped onto the beach. Squelch! The heels of her shoes sank deep into the sand, and Samantha was stuck where she stood. "Don't be a silly seagull, Samantha," said her friend Simon as he helped her out. "I like you as you are. You're the most beautiful seagull in the whole wide world. That's different enough for me." The other seagulls laughed and laughed, and Samantha felt embarrassed. So embarrassed, in fact, that she started to blush. And her bill went red, the rings around her eyes went red, her legs and feet went red, and she flew back to the shoe store with her shoes to change them. Slosh! Her second try at being different was no better than her first. Samantha's rubber boots filled with water, and she started to sink. "Save me, Simon, save me," she cried. The other seagulls laughed and laughed, and Samantha felt embarrassed. So embarrassed, in fact, that she started to blush. And her bill went red, the rings around her eyes went red, her legs and feet went red, and she flew back to the shoe store with her rubber boots to change them. Then Samantha bought a pair of slippers with purple pom-poms. They looked very warm and cozy. "How smart and how different I will be," she said. Splash! A wave washed over her slippers and made them wet and soggy. Simon shook his head in dismay. "I do wish you would stop trying to be different," said Simon. "Everyone is laughing at you." But Samantha was determined to be different, and she flew back to the shoe store with her slippers to change them. So Samantha bought some sandals, and she wore them all the time. They seemed to be just the thing. They didn't sink into the sand, they didn't fill up with water, and they didn't get wet and soggy. Samantha felt so different and so pleased with herself that she walked about with her head held high in the air. She didn't speak to the other seagulls. She didn't even speak to Simon. And Simon was sad. Slip, slippity, slap. One day when Samantha was strutting along in her sandals, she did not see the slippery seaweed in front of her. She fell on her face in a slimy pool. Her sandals sailed high into the air and sank forever in the deep blue sea. And once again, Simon was there to help her. The other seagulls laughed and laughed, and Samantha felt embarrassed, so embarrassed in fact that she started to blush. And her bill went red, the rings around her eyes went red, her legs and feet went red, but this time, that's how she stayed. "Ho, ho," said Hector the crab. "You are certainly different now. Ho, 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 I told you so." "This is too terrible," Samantha said to Simon as she looked at her reflection. "Whatever will I do?" "Never mind," said Simon as the two silver gulls walked along the shore together. "Now you are different in a very different way. And you are even more beautiful, the very most beautiful seagull in the whole wide world." "And you, Simon," said Samantha softly, "are very beautiful too." And for the first time in his life, Simon felt embarrassed. So embarrassed, in fact, that he started to blush. And his bill went red. The rings around his eyes went red. His legs and feet went red. And what's more, that's how they both stayed. Samantha Seagull's Sandals. Hope you liked that one. Hi there. Do you know what this is?
A caterpillar.
It's a caterpillar. Do you know what caterpillars turn into?
A butterfly.
They do? Do they always turn into butterflies?
Yeah.
Have you ever caught a caterpillar?
Yeah.
You have? What do you feed your caterpillar?
With leaves.
With leaves. Okay. Our next story is about Charlie the caterpillar. One day, one bright and sunny day, Charlie the caterpillar was born. The world looked very, very big to Charlie because he was very, very small. Because he was just born. Charlie soon found out how delicious green things tasted, and he was nibbling on a blade of grass. He could hear the wind whistling and the birds singing. He smiled. He was glad to be alive. Charlie decided to set out and see the world. So he looked to the left and he looked to the right, and then he went straight ahead. Soon Charlie saw two monkeys. "Hi," said Charlie. "What are you doing?" "We're playing cards," they said. "Oh," said Charlie, "that sounds like fun. Can I play too?" "No, you can't," said the monkeys. "Why not?" asked Charlie. "Because you're an ugly caterpillar. Now get out of here." Charlie, for the very first time in his young life, felt bad. He sighed and would have shrugged his shoulders if he had any. He looked to the left and he looked to the right, and then he went straight ahead. Pretty soon he saw two rabbits hopping around. "Hi," said Charlie. "What are you doing?" "We're playing tennis," they said. "Oh," said Charlie, "that looks like fun. Can I play too?" "No, you can't," said the rabbits. "Why not?" asked Charlie. "Because you're an ugly caterpillar and we don't play with ugly caterpillars. Now get out of here." Now for the second time in his young life, Charlie felt bad, very bad. His feelings were hurt. "What is ugly?" wondered Charlie. He didn't feel ugly. He looked to the left and he looked to the right, and then he went straight ahead. Just then, Charlie saw two mice playing miniature golf. These mice were so small they had to play miniature golf. "Hi," said Charlie. "What are you doing?" "We're playing golf," they answered. "Oh," said Charlie, "that really looks like fun. Can I play too?" "No, you can't," said the mice. "Why not?" asked Charlie. "Because you're an ugly caterpillar and we really don't play with ugly caterpillars. Now get out of here." Charlie, for the third time in his now not so young life, felt very, very bad. In fact, Charlie started to feel ugly. No one wanted to play with him, so Charlie looked to the left and he looked to the right, and then he started to cry. Charlie wanted to be alone. He climbed up a tree and snuggled up to a small branch. He felt a little cold, so he went like this, and he went like that, and he went like this, and he went like that, and before he knew it, he had spun himself a warm and wonderful cocoon. Charlie was very sad about that ugly business. "Why can't I have a friend?" he wondered. Charlie was so tired from making the cocoon that he decided to take a nap. All of a sudden, snow began to fall and to cover everything with white. Winter had come, but Charlie was nice and warm in his comfortable cocoon. Charlie dreamed that he had a best friend and that they laughed and had fun together. After a while, the grass began to grow, the flowers began to bloom, and the birds began to have a party in the sky. Spring had come, and somehow Charlie knew it was time to wake up. He yawned and stretched, and then, oh my goodness! Pop, pop! Charlie looked to the left and he looked to the right, and oh! He had wings, beautiful wings, butterfly wings. Charlie had become a beautiful butterfly. Charlie fluttered his wings, and guess what? He flew up and up and up. He laughed as he soared past the birds having a party in the sky. Charlie was flying high when he came upon the monkeys who were still playing cards. "Oh, please come and play with us," begged the monkeys. Why? Asked Charlie. Because you're a beautiful butterfly, they answered. No thanks, said Charlie, smiling. I gotta get out of here. He zoomed up and away. The monkeys jumped back, looking miserable. Serves them right, thought Charlie. He did a couple of loop-de-loops, and then he came across the rabbits at their tennis game. Oh, please, said the rabbits, won't you come and play with us? Why? Asked Charlie. Because you're such a beautiful butterfly, they answered. Not on your life, said Charlie. Now I gotta get out of here. Then off he flew, leaving the rabbits looking very downhearted. Serves them right, thought Charlie. He circled around for a while, and then he saw the mice playing miniature golf. Please, pretty please, pleaded the mice, do come and play with us. Why? Asked Charlie. Because you're really such a beautiful butterfly, they answered. Sorry, not today, said Charlie. I really have better things to do. Now I gotta get out of here. Then off he soared, leaving the mice looking pitiful. Serves them right, thought Charlie. They all wanted to be his friend because he was now a beautiful butterfly. They didn't know that he was Charlie the ugly caterpillar. If they want to be my friends just because of my beautiful wings, they can't be real friends, thought Charlie, as he fluttered in the spring sunshine. Just then, Charlie heard someone crying. It was Katy the caterpillar. Charlie came closer. Why are you crying? He asked. Because no one will play with me. No one wants to be my friend, cried Katy, because I'm an ugly caterpillar. I'll play with you, said Charlie with a wink and a smile. I'll be your friend. You will? Said Katy the caterpillar. Whoopee! Then Charlie took Katy aside and told her all about becoming a butterfly. From that day on, Charlie and Katy played cards and tennis and even miniature golf together. They laughed and had a good time, just like in Charlie's dream. Katy was happy and Charlie was very happy. He had finally found a friend, a real friend, a best friend. There are Charlie and Katy, caterpillars who turned into a butterfly. The story of Charlie the caterpillar. And I have Charlie right here. Here's Charlie. What do you think Charlie is going to turn into?
A butterfly.
A butterfly. Let's watch. Charlie became a beautiful, what is that?
Butterfly.
A butterfly. See those gorgeous wings? Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
Did you like that one?
Yeah.
Very good. Summer was here. It was time for the panda family to go on vacation. Where shall we go? Asked Mama. The mountains, said Papa. I want to see some climbing and see some great views. I'd like to go to the seashore, said Mama, so I can find beautiful shells. Priscilla sat daydreaming. I want to go on a cruise, she said. I love boats. And I love wild animals, said her brother Clyde. A safari would be a real adventure. Everyone thought about where they wanted to go, but no one could decide on a place they would all enjoy. Suddenly Priscilla shouted, look at this. She read an ad in the newspaper. Fantastic vacation, something for everyone, called Whirlwind Tours. Let's try it, said Papa. Call right away, said Mama. Priscilla made the call. It's all set, she said. We leave first thing in the morning. The Pandas spent all day packing. Where will we be going? Asked Clyde. It's a surprise, answered Priscilla. We won't know until we get there. Papa decided to pack his climbing boots just in case. Early the next morning, they all went outside. After a while, a brightly colored van pulled up. Get right in, folks, said a panda in a snappy uniform. Let me take your bags. Soon they were on their way. I hope it doesn't take too long to get there, said Priscilla. I just can't wait. At last, the travelers saw a large sign. It said, "This way to Paradise Park." The Pandas had never heard of it. They wondered what it was like. I'll bet it has lots of mountains, said Papa. It's probably at the seashore, said Mama. It might have a jungle full of wild animals, said Clyde. Maybe Paradise Park is on an island, and we'll have to get there by boat, said Priscilla. The ad promised something for everyone, said Mama. Let's hope that's really true. Just then, the Paradise Park entrance came into view. The van headed down the crowded streets and pulled up in front of the Paradise Park Hotel. What a place, exclaimed Papa as he climbed out of the van. The Pandas took an elevator to their room, but before they could unpack, there was a knock at the door. Let's go, called their guide. Whirlwind Tours keeps you moving. Outside, the van was waiting. The first stop was a museum. The Pandas wandered through its big rooms, filled with dinosaur skeletons and cases of fossils and rocks. Soon their guide said, "We're off to the aquarium. We mustn't be late." Inside the aquarium, fish of all sizes, shapes, and colors were swimming around in large tanks. Priscilla spotted a shark. "Look at all those teeth," she cried. "It's a good thing he's in a tank," said Clyde. The Pandas stopped at the gift shop and then headed back to the van. After the first day of sightseeing, the Pandas were very tired. Bedtime came, but they were too excited to fall asleep right away. Priscilla whispered to Clyde, "I can't wait till tomorrow. I wonder where we'll go." In the morning, the Pandas were off again. Paradise Park Tower was their first stop. They rode in a huge elevator and climbed some steep stairs. At the top, they could see for miles around. Papa pointed to a tiny object far below. "That's our van." Next, the van took the Pandas down to the river. Everyone boarded a sightseeing boat and they cruised far out on the water. When they were settled, Priscilla set out by herself to explore the boat. After a while, Papa asked, "Where's Priscilla?" They looked everywhere. Finally, they found her with the captain. "We thought you were lost," said Clyde. "Oh, no," Priscilla explained. "I was just helping the captain." Priscilla and the captain steered the boat to shore, and the Pandas hopped off. After lunch and an afternoon of shopping for souvenirs, everyone was tired again. At dinner, Mama said, "There's still a lot to see. I'm glad we have a whole week." "So am I," said Clyde. "I'll have time for a lot more of this fudge cake." The week was filled with wonderful places to visit. At the amusement park, the Pandas rode on a merry-go-round, went into a haunted house, and took a cable car ride. In the Paradise Park caves, the travelers climbed ladders, slid down chutes, and squeezed through narrow passageways. On the last day of the trip, the Pandas visited the zoo. They stayed in the van and watched the animals roam around outside. Clyde tried to talk to them, but none of them spoke the panda language. Clyde was so disappointed. The date to go home arrived. The Pandas packed up and boarded the van. This vacation turned out to be a real surprise, said Papa. Each of us got just what we wanted, and a lot more. You're right, said Mama. We didn't go to the seashore, but I bought shells at the aquarium. We didn't go on a real cruise, said Priscilla, but I went on a terrific boat ride. We didn't go on a safari, said Clyde, but I saw lots of wild animals at the zoo. And I climbed the tower and saw my views, said Papa. That was just as exciting as the mountains. The 4 happy pandas were so pleased they sang all the way home. That was the Pandas Take a Vacation. Our final story is one which features the Sesame Street gang. It's called It's Not Fair. One hot summer day, Ernie had a cool idea. Hey, Bert, he said, let's sell lemonade. Good idea, Ernie, said Bert. You go buy the lemons, then we'll make the lemonade together. Right, Bert, said Ernie. I will get the lemons, and he ran off to the store. On the way, Ernie saw Big Bird and Grover. Hi, said Ernie, I'm going to have a lemonade stand. Be sure to come. Oh, we will, said Big Bird. All these feathers can make a bird pretty hot. At Mr. McIntosh's store, Ernie saw big piles of lemons. He saw big piles of oranges, too. The oranges looked delicious. Ernie bought them instead of lemons. At Ernie and Bert's house, Bert painted letters on a piece of cardboard. They said, ice-cold lemonade, 10 cents a glass. When Ernie got home, Bert looked inside the bag. Ernie, these are oranges, he yelled. Where are the lemons? At the store, said Ernie. Bert groaned. We need lemons for lemonade. I will get the lemons and you finish painting the sign, said Bert. Ernie said, sure, Bert. Bert went to the store. Susan and Bob were there. Bert told everyone what had happened and they all laughed. You know how Ernie is. We can't expect him to get it right, said Susan. Lucky he has Bert, said Bob. Lucky? Said Bert to himself. It is not very lucky for me. Bert came home to a kitchen covered with blue paint. Ernie was covered with paint too. Ernie, what a mess you made, said Bert. Now I have to clean up and you have to take a bath. Right, Bert, said Ernie. You start making the lemonade. I will not be long. Bert squeezed the lemons. He added sugar and ice water. He filled a big pitcher with lemonade. Then he made the sign look nice and neat. At last, Ernie came back. He was sprinkling powder on himself. Most of it fell on the floor. Hi, Bert, I'm ready to help now. Help? Yelled Bert. You're no help at all. Bert set up the lemonade stand. Grover and Big Bird were the first to come. This lemonade is terrific. Ernie, said Grover. Big Bird said, it sure is. Ernie always has good ideas. Bert glared at Ernie. It is easy to have ideas, Bert grumbled to himself. It is not so easy to make them work. Susan and Bob came. So did Gordon and Mr. McIntosh. Everyone was thirsty. Clink, clink went their dimes. Ernie got the lemons at my store, Mr. McIntosh told everyone proudly. Lemons? Grumbled Bert. Ernie got oranges. I got the lemons. Gordon patted Ernie on the back. You did a great job, he said. Ernie smiled. Thanks, Gordon. Maybe I will do this every day. Bert got red in the face. Every day, he said. Sure, Bert, said Ernie. I will call it Ernie's Famous Lemonade. Bert couldn't stand it anymore. It's not fair, Bert shouted. I did all the work. I always do all the work. Ernie makes a mess. Ernie makes mistakes. But he has all the fun and everybody expects me to do everything. Then Bert burst into tears. Nobody ever even says thank you, he said, and ran outside. Oh, this is so sad, said Grover. He blew his nose. Gee, said Big Bird. I never knew Bert could cry. Bob said, everybody can cry, especially when everyone forgets about them, said Susan. Everyone felt terrible. Ernie felt the worst of all. I have to show Bert that I am really sorry. I will give him a present, he said. He left to look for the perfect surprise for Bert. When Ernie got home, he peeked into the kitchen. Bert was sniffling sadly. I'm sorry, Bert, said Ernie. I got you a present to cheer you up. Please don't cry anymore. Ernie gave Bert the present. Bert stopped sniffling. He opened the present. His frown turned into a smile. Oh, Ernie, how wonderful! A dustpan and a brush, said Bert. But you spent all the lemonade money on me. Ernie smiled shyly. That is okay, he said. You did all the work. Bert could not wait to try out the new dustpan and brush. He began sweeping up the powder. I will help, old buddy, said Ernie. No, said Bert. I like to sweep. Anyway, I sweep better than you, but you can keep me company, old pal. And Ernie did. There they are. The Sesame Street Muppets in It's Not Fair. Welcome once again to Story Hour. My name is Carole Gooden and I'm Media Specialist at Windmill Point Elementary. Today our stories are again all about summer. Our first story is called Great Day for Bears. 4 bears in bed. Father Bear, Mother Bear, Freddie Bear, and Molly Bear. Father Bear rubbed his eyes. The sun was shining in the window, and he was wide awake. Everybody up, he cried. It's going to be a great day. Father Bear put on his bear suit. Mother Bear brushed her hair and got dressed. Molly Bear needed help. Father Bear said, I'll help you. Where's my suit? Asked Freddie Bear. I can't find it. I've looked all over. Come with me, Mother Bear told Freddie. She took him outdoors. There, she said, you came home all wet and muddy yesterday, remember? Freddie did remember, and his mother had washed his suit and hung it out to dry. Be a good bear, his mother said. Stay out of the mud, please. It was just the day for adventure. The 4 bears walked along the river. Splash! A crayfish poked its head up out of the water. Freddie shouted, "Look, I'll catch it." But, oops, before anybody could call stop, Freddie Bear slid down the riverbank and splash into the water. Mother Bear said, "Oh, Freddie, not again." Father Bear said, "Can't you stay out of the mud?" But Molly Bear asked, "Are you all right, Freddie?" "Never mind, he'll soon be dry," Mother Bear said. She and Father Bear walked on along the river. Freddie Bear tried to shake himself dry. Then Molly Bear saw a beautiful butterfly. She ran after it and, oh! Molly Bear fell splash into the river. Now she was all wet too. Father Bear and Freddie pulled Molly out of the water. But Mother Bear only said, "You children, can't you take a walk without falling in the river?" She held her umbrella over her head and started to march across a log bridge. But Mother Bear didn't see a vine at the end of the bridge. Before she could call help, Mother Bear, umbrella and all, was sitting in the river. "Well," she said, "that was an accident." 3 wet bears walked along behind Father Bear. Suddenly he sniffed. "I smell honey," he said. Up the tree he climbed to reach the honey. "Look out!" everyone called. Too late. The tree branch broke. Down, down, Father Bear fell. Splash into the river. Now there were 4 wet, muddy bears. Molly Bear, Mother Bear, and Freddie laughed. Father Bear had to laugh too. He called, "Come on." Everyone in the water. Father Bear called, "This is a great day for a good splash." He swam after some fish, and Mother Bear floated with her umbrella held high. What a good time, all the bears splashing and swimming on a summer day. When the sun was low in the sky, it was time to go home. Father Bear carried 3 fish he had caught. Freddie had caught that crayfish after all, and Mother Bear and Molly Bear skipped along behind. That night, 4 bear suits hung on the line to dry. It was a great day for bears. The Relatives Came by Cynthia Rylant. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. They drove all day long into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging! Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. Then it was into the house and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front door. Those relatives. And finally, after a big supper 2 or 3 times around, until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras. So a few squeezed in with us and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden and they fixed any broken things they could find. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. And the relatives drove on, all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about next summer. The Relatives Came by Cynthia Rylant. Goes to camp. I'm not going, said Arthur. Arthur, you'll love camp. Think of all the new friends you'll make, said his mother. I've fond memories of my own camp days, said Arthur's father. Camp will teach you about the great outdoors. I'm not going. Arthur was at the camp bus stop the next morning. Buster was standing with a new kid. He's got 100 comic books in his footlocker, squealed Buster, pointing to the brain. Francine was there too. You guys better watch out. Tent 3 is full of bats and snakes, she yelled out the window. It's going to be just like school, the girls against the boys, thought Arthur. When the bus passed Camp Horsewater, even the girls stopped teasing. Look at those guys, said Buster. They're going to be in great shape for our scavenger hunt. No wonder they always win. That's no camp, that's a zoo, said Arthur. Things were different at Camp Meadowcroak. Well, at least for the girls. I'll do my best to make this a wonderful summer for you, said the girls' counselor, Becky. Even Muffy looked eager when she pulled up in her limousine. Where do I plug in my air conditioner? She hollered. The boys' counselor was a different story. Attention, men. Line up, barked Rocky. Stand up straight. Suck in those guts. I've never seen such a soft, flabby bunch. No dessert for you men this summer. Muffy had brought her own dessert. After dinner, that tasted like macaroni and fleas and worm burgers, she opened her trunk. The girls dug in. At bedtime, Muffy discovered the tent had no electricity. How will I brush my teeth? She moaned. The boys were too tired from all their running and push-ups to think of brushing their teeth. They crawled under the covers. Arthur screamed, Amphibians, how fascinating, said the brain. No, they're frogs, said Buster. Just wait until we get hold of those girls, said Arthur. Forget about the frogs, said the girls. You guys better worry about the softball game instead. The girls were beating the boys at everything. Disgusting, said Rocky. I'll never live this down. In fact, all that week the girls were great campers. They built campfires, pitched tents, tied knots, identified plants. All the boys could find was poison ivy. Rocky hid in his cabin. Arthur wrote postcards home. Dear Mom and Dad, I miss you, and I cried when I read your letter. When are you coming to get me? Camp is gross. Love, Arthur. Arthur had a lot to write about. The frogs in his bed were bad enough, but now really weird things were happening. The girls thought the boys threw a smoke bomb into their tent. The boys thought the girls took all their clothes. But one night everybody heard strange noises and footsteps in the woods. It had to be someone else. Arthur wrote, Dear Mom and Dad, this place gives me the creeps. I've got to get out of here. Love, Arthur. Everyone was too scared to tell ghost stories. We have to do something, said the brain. Let's stand watch tonight and find out what's going on. Woo! So that's it. Camp Horsewater, whispered Buster. They've been trying to scare us all along. Don't worry, we'll fix them tomorrow. At the scavenger hunt, said the brain. I've got a plan, but we'll need the girls' help. Arthur had a plan too. He decided to run away. Dear Mom and Dad, I decided not to wait for you to come and get me. I think I can remember how to get home. Love, Arthur. The next morning, Becky read the list of things to find. Frog, oak leaf, balloon, sunglasses, sneaker, banana, alarm clock, flashlight. And be back at sunset, she said. The brain nudged Francine. Time for phase 1 of the plan, he whispered. Watch out for bears. The woods are full of them, she yelled to the Horsewater kids. They just laughed. Nobody noticed Arthur sneaking away. Everybody was in the woods looking for things. Strange noises started coming from the bushes. Suddenly a huge furry animal burst from the underbrush. A bear, hollered Muffy and Buster and Francine, trying not to giggle. When the Meadowcroak team started hunting again, the bear helped too. How can you wear this coat, Muffy? The brain's voice floated out from the fur. It's so hot. It's never too hot for mink, Muffy groaned. Our plan really worked, but we still haven't found a flashlight. And has anyone seen Arthur? Said Buster. It doesn't matter if the Horsewater team never comes down from the trees. We can't win if we don't find everything, groaned Francine. Meanwhile, it was getting dark, and Arthur was lost. He heard strange noises. Were they footsteps? Arthur reached into his backpack for his flashlight. He snapped it on. A flashlight! We won! 3 cheers for Arthur. Arthur Goes to Camp by Marc Brown. Too hot in Potzburg. Summer came to the little city of Potzburg, but this summer was not like other summers. This time the sun felt bigger and redder and hotter than ever before. The heat was so great that chickens laid soft-boiled eggs. Bread toasted in the wrapper. Paint melted off the houses. Fish were caught, boiled, ready to eat, and corn popped right off the cob. The citizens gathered at the city hall to tell the mayor how they were suffering. "We cannot stand this terrible heat," they cried. "We citizens of Potzburg demand that you do something." The mayor called the city officials together. "We must help the people," he said. So they thought and talked for a long time. At last the chief of the Department of Heat, Cold, Rain, and Snow came up with a plan they all liked. "Wonderful," they said. "That is what we will do." Night and day the engineers made plans on their drawing boards. Day and night the machinery makers made parts and put them together. When the project was finished, the mayor said, "Let's surprise the people." So late at night, when all the citizens were asleep, a giant machine was taken to City Hall, put in place, and covered with a great red cloth. The next day, the citizens gathered in front of City Hall. The band played and the mayor made a speech. All the other city officials made speeches too. Then the two official city cannons were fired to the east and the west. The mayor's young daughter, using the official scissors, cut the ribbon that held up the red cloth. As the red cloth slowly floated to the ground, a great sigh of amazement came from the crowd. For there on top of City Hall, where the Golden Dome used to be, was an enormous electric fan, the biggest in the whole world. "And now," shouted the chief of the Department of Heat, Cold, Rain, and Snow, "plug in the great plug." The enormous blades began to turn, and the fan slowly revolved, pointing to the east toward Izaza, to the north toward Nugal, toward Willowa in the west, and Sherdlu in the south. Round and round spun the blades as the gigantic fan revolved. Soon the citizens in all parts of the city could hear the gentle whir and feel the cool breeze made by the spinning blades. "Oh, how lovely it feels," they said. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for driving away the terrible heat." After a while, people noticed that the gentle whir was getting louder. Leaves and bits of paper were floating through the air. Birds flying toward City Hall seemed to stay in one place, no matter how hard they flapped their wings. The whir became a hum, then a roar. The breeze became a wind. Hats and umbrellas filled the air. Faster and faster spun the blades. Dogs, cats, and chickens were swept into the air. People desperately held on to trees and posts. Louder and louder roared the fan. The wind had become a hurricane. Trash cans, furniture, trees, animals, and people flew through the air, eastward toward Izaza, northward toward Nugal, westward toward Willowa, and southward toward Sherdlu. "Pull the great plug," cried the chief of the Department of Heat, Cold, Rain, and Snow. After much tugging, the plug came out. The fan was stopped. All was still except at City Hall. "The city is almost empty," cried the mayor. "We must find a way to bring everyone back." The officials thought and worried and talked. Finally, the secretary in charge of coming and going had an idea everyone liked. New plans were made by the engineers who had not been blown away. Machine makers who were still in the city made new parts and put them together. The fabulous revolving electric fan was taken down and a new machine was put in its place. The new machine was a gigantic revolving vacuum cleaner. This vacuum cleaner, said the secretary in charge of coming and going, will suck back all that was blown away by the great fan. The vacuum cleaner was switched on. Humming loudly, it slowly turned, pointing to the east, then north, west, and south. Bits of paper and leaves were sucked in, then pots, pans, small birds, cats, dogs, bushes, trees, bicycles, horses, and all the people and other things belonging to Potzburg. "It's working! It's working!" shouted the city officials as they danced about and hugged each other. But the gigantic revolving vacuum cleaner was sucking in more than the Potzburg folk, for as it pointed to the east, the citizens and the things of Izaza were drawn in. From the north came Nugalites, from the west came the Willow-Willians, and in the south the sky was filled with Sherdluvians. Potzburg was overflowing with the citizens and goods from all around. "How dare you do this to us?" shouted the Izazans. "We demand to go home," cried the Nugalites. The Willy-Willians and the Sherdluvians joined the angry shouters and shook their fists at the Potzburg officials. Every wagon, cart, train, airplane, car, bus, bicycle, boat, wheelbarrow, buggy, and balloon in Potzburg was used to send all the angry people back to their homes. Now green leaves were turning yellow and orange. Summer was ending, and the weather had become very pleasant. The vacuum cleaner was taken down and the golden dome was put back on top of City Hall. The electric fan and the vacuum cleaner were put in the city park and made safe so that children could play on them. And for many years afterward, the people told their children and their children's children the story of that famous summer when it was too hot in Potzburg. Mm-hmm. You've got to teach me how to do river journey. A young woman named Tattie lived alone by the river, and she was as beautiful as a star-flung night. She kept a garden and a cow and some chickens and an old cat for company. She was seldom lonely except when the moon was full. Tattie loved all kinds of weather, sunny and foggy, and most of all, she loved rain. She liked to watch rain gush down the hills to her valley and flow into the river. But one day it rained too hard. The river flooded her garden and spoiled her vegetables, and that made Tattie cross. It flooded her barn, and that made her crosser. She led the cow and the chickens into the house, where they would be dry and safe. The cat dashed in too, and snuggled beside the stove. Higher and higher the water came, until it lapped at the wide front porch. The cow and the chickens stared at it in surprise, and the cat with curiosity. The rain came wilder, and the river rose higher. Wind shook Tattie's house, and the waves made it tremble and rock. The water rose higher and higher. Then it picked up Tattie's house and floated it away. Away went Tattie's house. bobbing and dipping across the flooded land. Tattie, the cow, the chickens, and the cat rode on the porch like passengers on a steamship. They floated past treetops with birds' nests in them, past the church steeple, the school bell tower, and past people in rowboats who waved. Pieces of furniture drifted by, along with wonders that Tattie had never imagined. The cow stared at the rushing waters and shook her horns, and the chicken wouldn't lay eggs for 3 days. The cat became so interested in what was floating by that he nearly fell overboard. Tattie dipped in her toes and laughed, for it was the best journey she'd ever had. She looked down through the water at roads and wagons and at the rooftops of the village. The rain came harder and the sky went dark, and a flock of ducks landed next to them. Tattie saw a dog swimming, frightened and cold. She got the broom and pulled him out. Then she dried him and gave him hot porridge. The rain came even harder. It battered the windows and rocked Tattie's house so. The butter made itself in the churn. Tattie saw a bundle of rags tied to a board that was bobbing merrily on the waves. She got her broom and pulled it in, and wonder of wonders, she found a baby, wet and shouting with hunger. Tattie dried and warmed him. She fed him with milk from the cow, then made him a bed by the stove. The rain poured down and the house rocked madly, and the pots all swung on their hooks. Tattie saw a plank floating. She saw a hand clinging to it. She grabbed the broom and fished it in, and found a young man nearly drowned. She heaved him aboard, though he was heavier than she, and pushed the water out of him. She dried his clothes and fixed him a hot meal. He was the homeliest young man Tattie had ever seen, but his eyes were bright and kind. He held the baby, petted the cat, and scratched the dog. Then he thanked the cow and the chickens for his supper and washed all the dishes up. The water rose so high that the treetops were dark shadows down under the waves. The wind grew stronger, and the waves came so big that Tattie feared for their lives. Then she saw some hills rising from the water like islands. She grabbed the broom and began to paddle, hoping to make land by nightfall, and the young man paddled too with the mop. On a hill they saw 2 fences running side by side. They paddled hard, thinking maybe they could tie the house up there. Tattie reached out with her broom. The young man reached out with his mop, and they pulled Tattie's house right between the 2 fences so it stood solidly wedged. Now that they had the house safely anchored, everyone went to sleep. When Tattie woke in the morning, the rain had stopped. The sun shone bright, and the water had receded. Her little house stood high in the sun, as solid as it could be. But Tattie's house did not stand on the hill as Tattie had expected it would. Tattie's house stood stuck fast between the rails of a high curving bridge. The river surged below, carrying tables and chairs and chicken coops, a wide, fast river running merrily. Tattie looked at the young man and he looked back, and then they made some breakfast. Neither could think of any way to get Tattie's house off the bridge. After breakfast, they led the cow down to graze and the chickens to peck after worms. Tattie stood in the field staring at her house, high on the bridge. She thought it looked snug as could be. Tattie smiled at the young man then, and he smiled back, and she knew she liked him a lot. Above them on the high hilltops they could see houses untouched by the flood. The yards were crowded with valley folk who had come to the hills for safety. They were bailing out boats, wringing out clothes and hanging them to dry, and rounding up animals that had swum through the flood. A little road ran right up to the bridge and away on the other side. When a cart came along wanting to cross, Tattie opened her front door and showed it through her parlor. Then she opened her back door and showed it out again. When the next cart came, Tattie did the same, but this time she invited the travelers to tea. They all sat in the parlor looking out at the water. It was a very fine view indeed. Tattie served seed cakes and hard-boiled eggs and marmalade sandwiches. She smiled at the young man, and he winked back at her. Tattie and her young man were married in Tattie's parlor in her house on the bridge, and they lived in that house for all their days. Many a cart to pass through their front door and through their parlor and out through their back door again. While that was friendly, it was a bit crowded, so Tattie and her young man built more rooms upstairs under a new roof. Then in the old parlor, to make their living, they served the travelers seed cakes and marmalade sandwiches. They mended their carts and patched their harnesses and shod their horses for them. It was a grand life indeed. Though sometimes Tattie or her young man or the cat or the dog or the baby would gaze down at the river and wonder if those waters would ever rise again, ever fill the world again, so they could have another ride. The cow and the chickens never wondered. They were content to peck and graze. The baby grew up as handsome as Tattie and as kind as her young man, and wherever he traveled, the wide world over, he always loved rivers, was always happy near rivers, as he had been in Tattie's house on the bridge. That was Tattie's river journey. Ribtickle Town. I took a stroll one sunny day and very soon had lost my way. I walked a country mile or two, and then a town came into view. A sign along the roadside read, "Ribtickle Town is just ahead." I entered through a pair of gates all fashioned out of dinner plates, and found myself upon a square as odd as anywhere, with fountains spouting figure eights and constables on roller skates, and shops that offered holy socks and seven-handed mantel clocks, and tinkers' tools and ducking stools, and patent pumps for dancing fools, and willow wands for witchery, and skeins of silk for stitchery, and quantities of extra horns for absent-minded unicorns. Some houses in these whereabouts were teapots topped with chimney spouts, and others glossy petit fours with chocolate and vanilla doors, and one a bell and one a shell, and far too many more to tell. The trees, which all had arms and legs, bore sausages and hard-boiled eggs, and some grew mice and marmosets that you could pick and keep for pets. As 60 clocks began to chime, 6 citizens asked me the time. Then, though it seemed a little strange, a beggar handed me some change. A friendly giant offered me a crumpet and a cup of tea, and introduced me to the gnome who shared his odd split-level home. I took a goose-down carriage ride with Ted, the town's official guide. We passed the jail that, strange to tell, had candy bars in every cell. Ted parked the coach on Zigzag Street and took me for a bite to eat. I started with a chocolate steak and finished with spaghetti cake. I watched some children flying kites that rose to such astounding heights that kites and children very soon had landed on the crescent moon. Then, as the light began to wane, I thought of going home again. I found the road I'd walked before, and soon was at my kitchen door. At dinner, I told Mom and Dad the story of the day I'd had. How nice, they said, but I could see they thought it was a fantasy. I wondered if they might be right, but then, when I went to bed that night, I found a little card that read, "Good for one carriage ride with Ted, Ribtickle Town." This story is dedicated to small business persons under 12, wherever they may be. It's called Summer Business. School was over. Visitors were coming to the island. "My father says everyone ought to learn how to work," Sam told his friends. "We should all work this summer," everyone agreed. But at the inn, Sam was told he was too young. "It's too late," they told Lulu at the store. "We have all the help we need." At the library, Miss Jackie told Heather she already had too many volunteers. "But," she said, "why don't you sell something? Get together and talk about it. You can use the picnic table on the back lawn as a meeting place. Ideas will come." Everybody had ideas. They finally decided that Lulu and Hamilton would sell painted rocks and shells. Jonathan, May, and Sam would run a flea market. Kate and Heather would sell lemonade and cookies. Rita would dog sit, pick up mail, and fill in wherever she was needed. She would also be treasurer. They decided they would save their earnings till the end of summer, except for what they spent on supplies and occasional ice cream. Getting ready was fun. They worked in Heather's father's fish house, painting stones and shells. Kate's mother helped them bake cakes and make lemonade. Kate and Heather set up their stand close to the inn. The first week everything was grand. The sun was bright and hot, though cold breezes hurt business twice. Heather's mother said not to be bothered. All businesses run into trouble from time to time. May, Sam, and Jonathan set up the flea market on a stone wall. They had lots of lookers and some buyers. Sam's grandfather liked everything until he saw the copper fish. "Now how could Becky have given you my old tuna tournament third prize?" he said. He took it back and next day brought them a brass monkey pipe rack instead. The painted rocks were displayed in front of the church. They sold so well the first week that Hamilton and Lulu worried about when they could help make more. They were too busy selling. As Lulu's mother said, "There's no business without problems." The flea market was such a success that Sam and Jonathan were beginning to worry about running out of things to sell. Sam's mother donated a few more objects, but there was one thing she refused to give away. Rita got so busy that she had to ask May to help her. Then suddenly business turned bad. A heavy shower washed the paint off the rocks and shells. Lulu and Hamilton were stunned. "We used the wrong kind of paint," Hamilton said. "Now we have nothing to sell," complained Lulu. The next day, Kate forgot to put sugar in the lemonade. A jogger came by and bought a cup. He coughed and sputtered. He told everybody about it, and for a while, nobody bought lemonade. Hamilton was sitting in the family skiff worrying about what to do. A couple on the beach asked him if it was possible to visit the ancient Indian rock drawings on the small island in the harbor. Hamilton said he'd be happy to row them over. They insisted on paying him. That gave him an idea, and he dashed off to find Lulu. One Saturday and Sunday, all business stopped. Everybody hunted for the Browns' cat. She had disappeared, and the Browns were coming back on the late boat Sunday. They searched the cliffs, both the beaches, through the woods, and under houses, but they did not find her. Then 2 hikers said they'd seen a cat on the Whitehead Bluff. And sure enough, out of the darkness of Mermaid's Cave, there poked a small yellow head. They passed the cat up from hand to hand, and everyone was happy, especially the Browns. A week of rain ruined the lemonade business. Kate went into full-time cat and dog sitting with Rita and May. Heather joined Hamilton and Lulu, who were very busy taking people to Indian Rock. Heather sold tickets and answered questions. Lulu stayed on the small island and escorted people to the site. Hamilton rowed people back and forth. Rain, sun, fog, cold or hot, they were always busy. The flea market was almost sold out. Business was dull. Sam's father said, "Why don't you sell the old boys? They're antiques. Everyone's using plastic now. It's lighter. Get a wheelbarrow and pick them up. I'll bet they'll sell." They did. The flea market came to life again. It was the 2nd day of September. The passenger ferry came in empty and went away full. There had been almost no business anywhere for days. It was the first time they were all able to go swimming together. "Before school starts, my mother wants to take me to the Harvest Fair on the mainland," Lulu said. "I wish we could all go," Hamilton said. "Why don't we use some of our money for the fair?" Heather asked. Everyone thought it was a great idea. They would ask 3 mothers to take them. They would stay at a motel and spend almost 2 days at the fair. They all turned to Rita, the treasurer, who had been very quiet. "I think we can do it," she said. They saw a horse race. They entered and lost in the 3-legged race. They won prizes. They bought things. They saw a strong man pull a wagon loaded with hay. They saw some lovely prize ducks, some huge prize pigs, prize chickens, cows, corn, and apples. They took all the rides, and when they reached the Crestwood Motel, there was nothing on their minds but sleep. They crossed back to the island on a gentle sea. They talked about school. They talked about their earnings. The next day they went to see Miss Jackie to tell her all about their trip. "And," said Heather, "we even have some money left." "What are you going to do with it?" asked Miss Jackie. "Come with us and see," said Rita. And they all left the library together. Guess what? They had a picnic. This was the story of summer business. What Ernie and Bert did on their summer vacation. One hot, steamy afternoon at 123 Sesame Street, Ernie sat looking through his collection of travel folders. He was trying to figure out where he and Bert should go for their summer vacation. Suddenly, Bert rushed in. He had just come from Benny's bargain basement and a sale on rubber thong beach sandals. "Guess what, Ernie?" shouted Bert. "I bought 3 thongs for the price of 1. Some terrific bargain, huh, Ernie?" "I guess so, Bert," said Ernie, "if you happen to have 3 feet. Tee-hee-hee. Say, Bert, have you ever been to Walla Walla, Washington? Only then did Bert notice that he was surrounded by a monumental mess. There were travel folders everywhere. "Ernie, explain this mess." "Mess? What mess?" "Bert, we have to decide where we're going on our vacation, don't we?" "Well, I've got a few places in mind, Bert." "I can see that, Ernie," Bert muttered as he waded through the sea of folders and sank into his favorite armchair. "Here's one that really sounds terrific, Bert. Ride a raft down the Socketooee River. Thrills, chills, and spills. How about it, old buddy?" "Dangerous water sports have never appealed to me, Ernie." "Then how about this one, Bert? Experience the height of adventure. Mule trek across the far-off Himalayan mountains." "You know I can't stand heights, Ernie," said Bert, "and you won't catch me riding on some lumpy old mule. No, sir." "Would you like to hear my idea of a fun-filled vacation?" asked Bert. "I'm all ears, Bert." "A week in Lockjaw, New Jersey," Bert announced. "What's there?" said Ernie, already sorry he'd asked. "Rhonda's Rest Resort, which is just down the road from the Acme Bottle Cap Manufacturing Company," answered Bert. "Gee, Bert, I know you're really crazy about bottle caps, but—" "And that's not all," Bert continued excitedly. "Every Friday night, Rhonda gives a talk on the feeding habits of the rare lockjaw pigeon." "I don't know how to break this to you, old buddy," said Ernie, "but pigeons are, well, they're kind of boring." Bert's face fell. "To me, Bert, only to me," Ernie quickly added. "Gee," said Bert sadly, "for 2 old buddies, we don't have very much in common, do we?" "Oh, I wouldn't say that, Bert. We both like peanut butter sandwiches. Cheer up. I've got lots more ideas." And where did Ernie and Bert finally decide to go? Why, the very same place they went to last year and the year before that, the seashore. "You and Rubber Ducky can ride the waves in your rubber raft, Ernie," suggested Bert. "Right, old buddy. And you can comb the beach for rare bottle caps," said Ernie. "So let's get packing." Suddenly, Ernie began racing around the apartment, madly emptying closets and drawers. Bert couldn't believe his eyes. Ernie was packing everything in sight: his miner's helmet, his ski poles, the moose head, his hockey stick. "Ernie," said Bert, "you don't need all this stuff." "You never know, Bert. You just never know," Ernie replied. "Come on, Ernie," cried Bert. "You can't possibly use a hot water bottle at the beach. You never know when it might come in handy, Bert." "Ernie, you're packing everything but the kitchen sink." "Sorry, Bert, but there's no room for the sink. Not if we're taking the living room rug." Ernie and Bert piled all their things into their car and they were off. Bert was at the wheel. Ernie sat beside him, strumming his ukulele. "This is the life, old buddy," said Ernie. "I can feel that warm, silky sand between my toes already." I hope it doesn't rain like last year, Bert said cautiously. Not a chance, said Ernie. They were cruising merrily down Route 456 when all of a sudden they heard the most awful sputtering and hiccuping noises. Wow, that's some ruckus your stomach's making, Bert, Ernie observed. Sounds like you forgot to eat your oatmeal this morning. It's not me, Ernie. It's the car. It's out of gas, Bert said, pulling over to the side of the road. Gee, Bert, you forgot to fill the old tank, huh? I forgot. Now just a minute. You were the one who said, I'm going to fill her up, Bert. Right, Ernie? That's exactly what you said. Right, Bert. But I was talking about my hot water bottle. Oh, no, I don't believe it, groaned Bert, beating his head on the steering wheel. Don't worry, Bert. I'll take care of everything, said Ernie, jumping out. Ernie, now what are you doing? Bert asked. Ernie had rooted his drums out of the back of the car and set them up by the road. By this is no time to practice your drums, Bert shouted as Ernie started banging away. Yes, it is, Bert. I'm drumming up some help. On a nearby farm, lovable, furry Farmer Grover lay snoozing under a shady apple tree. Suddenly he was rudely awakened. What is this strange drumming in my ears? He cried. He jumped up and ran toward the noise. And there, by the highway, he spied Ernie wildly waving his drumsticks in the air. Greetings, traveling musicians. It is I, Farmer Grover. You're making such beautiful music that I want to play it too. Please do not go away. I'll run and get my cute little instrument and be back in 3 squiggles of a pig's tail. Then, without giving them any time to explain, Farmer Grover was off like a shot. Soon he was back with his instrument, which looked very much like an old washtub. Do you know my favorite song, Old MacDonald Had a Farm? Farmer Grover asked. Sure, said Ernie, starting to pound out the rhythm. Farmer Grover began to plunk along. Wait, what about the car? Bert shouted over the racket. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there and a quack-quack here and a quack-quack there. Stop, stop, yelled Bert. With a stop-stop here and a stop-stop there, sang Ernie and Farmer Grover. Finally, Bert managed to explain to Farmer Grover that the car needed to be towed. I would be happy to tow you any place you want with my cute little orange tractor, said Farmer Grover. But first, I have just one little chore to finish. We'll help you, offered Ernie. Oh, that is so nice of you, said Farmer Grover. The chores were done at last. So, good as his word, Farmer Grover hooked up his tractor to the car. Now, just where would you like to go? He asked. To the nearest gas station, please, said Bert. In a flash, Farmer Grover jumped off the tractor and ran into a little shed nearby. When the door swung open, there stood Mechanic Grover next to a little gas pump. Welcome to Grover's little gas station, he announced. You mean there was gas right here all along? Groaned Bert. Why didn't you say so in the first place? Cried Ernie. Oh, I'm sorry, said Grover, but you did not ask. Now fill her up. Check the oil. Soon Ernie and Bert were zooming down the highway again. Which way to the beach, Bert? Asked Ernie, but Bert dozed off with the map spread out on his lap. Then Ernie spotted a sign which read, Don't miss it, Mount Baby. He thought, I've always wanted to see Mount Baby. We'll just take a little side trip. He turned and followed a winding road higher and higher into the mountains. Where are we? Asked Bert, waking with a start. At the Mount Baby lookout, just in time for the sunset, said Ernie. Let's look through these viewers, Bert, so we can see Mount Baby close up. And are you looking, Bert? Uh-huh, said Bert, but I can't see it. There are too many clouds. Gee, Bert, I can see it clearly. It's tall and kind of egg-shaped, and right on the tippy top there's a big hairy bush. Hairy? Wait a minute. Something strange here. Ernie looked around the side of his viewer and exclaimed, Guess what, Bert? I've been looking at the back of your head. The sun had sunk behind the mountains. By the time they reached the highway, it would be dark. So Ernie suggested they spend the night in the woods. Absolutely not, Ernie, said Bert, alarmed at the prospect. Besides, we didn't bring any camping equipment. Sure we did, Bert. Then Ernie began to load Bert down with all their baggage. Hey, Ernie, cried Bert, staggering under his heavy burden. How come you're not carrying anything? One of us has to blaze the trail, Bert. Follow me, said Ernie, as he charged into the woods. They found a pleasant campsite by a stream, and Ernie set to work immediately. Hand me the carpet, Bert. Bert did so gladly. Now the ski poles, please. Stand by with that hockey stick, Bert. In no time at all, Ernie had made a tent out of the living room rug, using the ski poles and hockey stick to hold it up. Try out the tent, Bert, said Ernie. I'm going fishing for our dinner. I just hope I don't run into a giant walking catfish. A giant walking catfish, said Bert, shaking his head. Come on, Ernie, that's ridiculous. Ernie soon returned with some Baldy Mountain speckled trout. After a delicious dinner, Ernie and Bert crawled into the tent for the night. Well, here we are, snug as two bugs in a rug, said Ernie. Good night, Bert. Sleep tight, Ernie. Ernie went straight to sleep, but soon he woke up with a start. Are you awake, Bert? He whispered, but there was no answer because Bert wasn't there. He's gone, Ernie wailed. Bert's gone. There was a splash down by the stream. Oh, no, cried Ernie. A giant walking catfish, poor Bert, in the flippers of a giant walking catfish. Oh, I'll never see my old buddy again. Suddenly, there was a rustle in the bushes. Ernie's hair stood on end. A big, shadowy shape came lumbering toward him out of the darkness. "Aye!" screamed Ernie. "Aye!" screamed the shape. Ernie put on his miner's helmet and shone its lamp on the shape. "Hey, get that light out of my eyes!" yelled a familiar voice. "Bert!" cried Ernie. "My old buddy Bert! Boy, am I glad to see you! How did you escape the catfish? Huh, Bert? I thought I'd never see you again." "What catfish, Ernie? I was just down by the stream brushing my teeth. Now let's get some sleep." "Boy, Bert," said Ernie when they were safely back in their tent, "wait till we tell the gang at Sesame Street how you battled the giant walking catfish single-handed." On their way down from the mountains the next morning, they stopped at a monument of a pioneer family. "Gee, they sure were funny looking back in those days, huh, Bert?" said Ernie. "I don't know what you mean, Ernie. They looked fine to me. Handsome, in fact." They were back on the highway again when Ernie spotted a sign that said, "Turn here for car wash." "Wow, we can't afford to pass this up," said Ernie. "Roll up the windows, Bert. We're driving through." "Wait, Ernie, I think we've forgotten something," Bert shouted as a huge bristly brush ran over the top of his head. "Hold it, Ernie. The top is down." But it was too late. The next thing they knew, they were up to their necks in soapy water. "Look at it this way, Bert," said Ernie as they drove out the other end. "There's nothing like a brisk, cold shower first thing in the morning. Ernie, said Bert, I think I'd like to drive now. Bert had been driving for some time when Ernie noticed a strange change in the scenery. Bert, I think we've taken a wrong turn somewhere. Don't bother me when I'm driving, Ernie. But Bert, this looks like Africa. When I'm at the wheel, I don't play silly games, Ernie. I keep my eyes on the road. Look, Bert, cried Ernie, there's a hippo. Sure, sure, said Bert, still staring straight ahead at the road. Look, a giraffe, Ernie cried. Oh, yeah, and I suppose there's an orangutan, too. Right, Bert, how did you know? Even Ernie didn't know that a lion had jumped into the back of the car and was having a wonderful time, looking through Bert's binoculars. Suddenly the lion spotted the big moose head beside him. With a frightened roar, he leaped out of the car. What was that? Shrieked Bert, finally looking around. Ernie, he cried, we're in a jungle, help! That's what I've been trying to tell you, Bert. Bert stepped on the gas and they zoomed out of there as fast as they could. It had been an exhausting morning, so they decided to stop for a snack at a diner called Colonel Mustard's Last Stand. Bert had a bowl of lukewarm oatmeal and Ernie had pancakes. Later they stood under the statue of Colonel Mustard. Isn't he a handsome feller? Bert remarked. Look, said Ernie, pointing up to a sign in the Colonel's hand. The sign says it's only 5 miles to the beach. Let's get going. Finally, they arrived at the beach. Bert put on his rubber thongs and he and Ernie climbed over a high dune. There at last was the sparkling ocean. Looks just like the picture in the travel folder, huh, Bert? This is a peach of a beach. Bert looked around for signs of rain. There were none, so he carefully spread his beach towel on the sand. Ah, peace and quiet, nothing to do but watch the waves. He sighed contentedly. Say, Bert, want me to make you a sand castle? Ernie asked. I want to take a long nap, Ernie, yawned Bert. Fine, you do that, old buddy, and by the time you wake up, the sand castle will be all done. When Bert woke up, he found that he was buried in a huge pile of sand with only his head sticking out. Ernie, what's going on here? He bellowed. Ernie was busy digging a moat around Bert. See, I made you a sand castle, Bert. Now I think I'll go and get some hot dogs and soda pop. See you later, Bert. Ernie, get me out of here, yelled Bert. I don't want to be a sand castle. I want some lunch. Ernie, come back. My nose itches. Ernie, I think it's going to rain. Finally, Ernie returned with the hot dogs and soda. I see. You've made a feathered friend, Bert, Ernie observed. Sorry to be so long, but there was a big line at the hot dog stand. It's starting to rain, Ernie, moaned Bert. Don't worry, Bert, said Ernie. I'll take care of everything. He pitched a beach umbrella over Bert's head and sat under it with him. Gee, said Ernie, handing Bert a figgy fizz. Isn't this fun? Aren't you glad we decided to come to the beach? That's what Ernie and Bert did on their summer vacation.